Hardial Rai.
And you were born in?
East Africa. I was born in Tanzania, Dar es Salaam.
And you're involved in theatre?
That's right, yeah. I have been involved in theatre right from the early days of South Asian, development of South Asian theatre. Yeah.
And what made you get into it?
I initially went into a film school, and I just found there wasn't much happening there in terms of career prospects and all that kind of thing. And and I had just some issues at home because my generation, it was difficult for us to get into the arts. So I just sort of bummed around and got involved in theatre, and we set up. I went to a few kind of courses. Again, not any formal training, but just a lot of workshops, training here and there, and came across like-minded people like me who wanted to do something within the kind of black arts sector, and this is way back in 79, 80. And the only thing at that time going was Star Arts, and so I think we started going there to do their kind of workshops, etc., like that. But there's a bunch of us coming all the way from Hounslow, West London. Every time every twice a week we would go there. So we thought of setting up something ourselves in West London, which we did, and then it just developed from there, really.
What was this something?
Sorry?
What was this something in West London?
We called it Hack Theatre. It was an arts cooperative. It was a theatre company. We did a number of plays, got some funding from the GLC, and then eventually got the Arts Council funding for project funding. We kind of, I think that we started in 81, and then it went on to becoming a professional company by 84, 85. Yeah.
And what was your role in it?
I basically kind of like wrote the first few plays, and then directed a few, then ended up doing the admin because nobody was doing it. So I ended up producing, and so most of my career I've kind of been producing. Yeah.
So did you do any performing yourself?
Very early on, again, we were lucky to get a lot of people at that time who wanted to go on stage and had their own ideas what they wanted to do, but there was need of somebody just being around to make things happen.
So was there a sense of South Asianness about your theatre then at that time?
Politically, yes. Well, not South Asian theatre, but definitely some British Asian kind of situation going on there, because at that time there were a number of national situations happening. There were the riots in Southall, which kind of really impacted us. And there was a general kind of search for identity from our generation at that time. And it was for us to set up something like that was very similar to, say, punk music, because we were punk rockers at one point in our lives, and it was easy to just set up something ourselves rather than go to a conventional parts, and a lot of people the same kind of experience and aspiration had a similar outlook that, okay, well, we haven't got formal training, we haven't been to drama schools or any kind of music colleges, but we've got something to say, and theatre was the most accessible and cheapest way of doing it. And you could just basically do it in a room and crash your way into a theatre, get a programmer to look at you, and that's how it happened. Yeah.
So really, it was the voice of British Asian.
Yeah, it was kind of, the voice was more important than the method or the technique, etc. What we had to say was more important. Yeah, and for ourselves as well, we went out in search of what is theatre to us. There was because there was a kind of like a political viewpoint. So we went out and they said, right, who's the equivalent of Shakespeare in our culture? Who's the equivalent of this? And we came across Tagore, we came across the Mahabharata. But then while doing that, we also found, well, actually, not really. This text, this piece's work belong somewhere else. They don't belong here for us. So that's when we started creating our own writing, our own sense of theatre. And that took a quite long time, and that I think even now I wouldn't say any of us got there with any sort of any separate theatre, is there,
So you're constantly experimenting, evolving to this day, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think so, because we are a mainstream culture here. We do look at ourselves, but then there are issues that only affect us. So we kind of go under those layers and start creating work in that environment.
So how would you describe your own artistic journey within this bigger development?
Well, I mean, I grew, as I said, I was earlier saying, I grew up, listening to punk music. I listened to rock music. I didn't know anything about Asianness about me. But then, when it came to wanting to say something, the only thing that anybody else wanted to listen from me or my generation was our identity. We tried to do work which was nothing to do with identity, nothing to do with our color, but nobody was paying attention to that. So in a way, we kind of like were forced into that sort of situation where if we wanted to do something, it was to do with our
And how did
identity.
your family and friends respond to that?
Well, the arts in our culture is seen as a hobby, mainly. I found as I went further in my growth that in the Indian subcontinent, the arts are, to take it as a profession is a huge, huge step forward for anyone. And you get a lot of people who are talented, but they're also doctors or nurses or whatever. So within that kind of cultural framework, I mean, my expectation in my family was to go and do something, but there was a kind of rebellion against that, and so we just did. We did odd jobs here and there. I've done everything. Been a milkman, postman, everything. Tax inspector to get there. But the hunger to be involved in the arts was much more dominant. And so we took a lot of, I would say our generation took more risks, and also our generation suffered a lot of consequences as a result of that. There was not kind of proper family support, no.
So how do you feel the situation is today?
Oh, now it's totally changed, now, it's great, like young kids want to get involved in the arts, they do so properly, they go to university and study drama or music or whatever, and it's brilliant. I mean, for us to see that, it's great.
And no doubt it's because of people like you who paved the way initially.
Well, I hope so. There's a whole generation of us, just not in theatre, but in everything, music and dance, everything, that took big risks at that time, and it was difficult, a lot of hardship, and hopefully we've kind of changed an outlook, like you can see Black Asian people doing mainstream work, and that's brilliant. That's good to see.
And you were saying that you now work on a lot of different platforms.
Yeah, I mean, I think the working on different platforms is an interesting thing, because I think it's a lot to do with because we never got trained properly in any one specific form. And also, as we grew, we noticed that within our cultural kind of framework, from when we started drawing upon the Asian framework, there is a sense of a total arts experience, there's a total theatre experience or whatever, and that involves dance, music, performance and text or whatever. And I was always interested in a number of things. I was never interested in one thing. I mean, yeah, I've done a lot of production in theatre, but I've also done a lot of music-based projects. We're running a music project here, which is looking at a totally radical approach to Indian classical music. We do a lot of dance theatre shows. You know, we've done. We've got a storytelling festival going on at the moment. Yeah, you name it. Yeah, it's because of that sense of that we just got up and did it, and we just go up and do whatever interests us. Yeah.
So are you very aware of your audiences when you do any of your work? Or do you do your work first and hope an audience will respond to it?
It's a bit of a both in terms of audience. I think I was when I was a programmer for about 10 years, you kind of saw it from the audience point of view, and you kind of then shaped a certain work for that audience. And I think that's quite key. That's very important. That a lot of companies and artists don't do that sometimes. And for us to find our audience was also a development process, you know, because as I was saying earlier, right at the beginning, we were kind of pigeonholed or categorized that whatever we wanted to say had to have anything to do with identity. And our community, our audiences don't really want to know that. You know, they know what they are. The only audiences fit for that was the mainstream white audience. So a lot of the work earlier on you see in Asian theatre, in black theatre, everywhere, is didn't really kind of hit the mark with audiences. And only in the 90s, when we started becoming relaxed about identity, in fact, when we started doing comedy, and comedy is a huge releasing sort of art form, you know, in which you can laugh at yourselves, and that kind of created an audience in our communities, and that has now grown. Yeah.
A lot of Asian theatre here now, it's quite populist, it's gone down that route. And how do you feel you fit into this or don't fit into this trend?
No, I don't think it's a matter of not fitting or fitting. I think it's part of that, what I was saying earlier, that it's part of the development. You know, in anything you have to start with a kind of identity thing, whatever, and then as we kind of carried on, we became relaxed about that. And you know, and when you take away the issue kind of situation, identity issue, so the subject matter, the topic matter you have, it's really wide. And what we have in our culture is a huge kind of populist form, the Bollywood form. And for us to engage our audiences, we had to engage with that. And as a result of that, a lot of the Asian theatre has become populist, which is good. And but at the same time, I find it's also denial. It's in denial of exploring a number of major issues. For instance, not a lot of Asian theatre companies are grappling with the whole Islamic issue at the moment, for instance, you know, which is a huge kind of thing for the whole South Asian community. The Sikhs went through that in the 80s, and now the Muslims are going through that at the moment. So yeah, I mean, there's, and again, the populist thing is an expectation of when you want to create work, you have to fill in, you know, numbers of audiences, and that's usually the best way to do that. But I think there's become a kind of lazy mentality that you can use populists to make to look at some serious issues.
So perhaps you could let us know a little bit about the productions you're currently involved in, because you've got quite a few, haven't you?
Yeah, we have. I mean, at the moment we're rehearsing upstairs is Yarma. Which is interesting, is a dance theatre. We're using Kathak, the Indian classical form, it's called the classical form, which, you know, we look at it as a contemporary form, because Kathak is any Indian classical arts. We look at it as a contemporary form because they have been evolving over time and period, and now they've come to a new environment, new cultural domination, and they have evolved. They have adapted. And this particular production is looking at the movement and vocabulary of Kathak in a totally contemporary way. Again, I don't like to use the words contemporary, so it's just what we are. The production is Amina Kayama, who's again very British-based, learned all of Kathak here. And we're looking at Yarma, and it was interesting, the story of Yarma, based in 19th century Spain, going through a whole similar religious influence as, say, a community in inner city Britain would be going through at the moment. Whether it's a Sikh community, whether it's a Muslim community, etc., there's a dominance of religious influence, conditioning, expectation. And within that we place Yarma, and that is telling that story in a modern inner city Britain, where she yearns for a child, but she can't have one due to a number of factors. And but one of the interesting, a major part of our production is we're doing a lot of outreach work. We're going to the communities in Luton, Birmingham, and parts of Tower Hamlets and Camden here. And that's quite a key part of the production, because we're taking part of the production there, because we want to engage those communities, those women who are going through similar situations. So in that way, it's a very engaging production, and it hopefully it'll be all right in about 3-4 weeks' time when it goes out. Yeah.
And are you doing something at the Riverside now?
We're based at the Riverside, and we've got a couple of productions next year in development there. One is called End of Racism, which is just looking at the whole global economy of oil and sex. And that should hopefully go up next year, this time next year. Another things we're doing, we're doing a whole project here at the Cockpit, which is looking at a totally different way of Indian classical music. The idea there is that we look over the last few years, there's a new generation of British-trained, British-based musicians who've come in. They're in their early 20s, and they have a totally different way of looking at music. They don't look at the way that a previous generation did, that there's a respectful thing of the teacher, etc. And they want to kind of break free from that, and within that they want to explore something totally new and radical, and even make statements to the rag structure. And that's a really key project that we've helped to facilitate. And as a result, the 2 projects have come through and created new rags. Other than that, we're doing a whole storytelling project at the moment in West London, where we started from, and it's in schools, libraries, etc. And another project we're working on is the professionalizing of vernacular theatre, vernacular South Asian theatre, and that's a big project for us, because it's personally for me, when I was a programmer at Waterman's, what I used to see was that the audiences, the community wanted to see a totally different type of theatre, so what may be described as populist, but it didn't matter. Actually, you were able to use a lot of highly sensitive issues through that theatre form. Like we did a lot on domestic violence and incest issues, which were totally taboo, but we managed to explore them through that populist theatre, through language theatre. So this theatre was in Punjabi, Gujarati, and I found that at that time there was a lot of activity out there, but it wasn't being programmed. It wasn't going into the professional stages. It was in community centres and school halls, and that kind of situation made me very angry, and so we brought that into the Watermans. But then I left Watermans, and I found recently that it went back into the community centres. So our project now is, what we're doing is we're getting some of the venues teaming up with the rep theatres and professionalising that form. So I'll give you an example where we did Shivam Theatre as a Gujarati-based theatre company, and we we've got the Lyric Theatre in Hammersmith involved with that. And it played at places like Waterman's and Patida Centre in Wembley. And it went on to tour at the People's Centre. The idea there is that you use the professionalism of a rep theatre, but you use the sort of the content, the form of the community, and you bring it together, and then hopefully that will gel together and create a. In essence, I think that would be I describe that as South Asian theatre. Anything else that we've been doing, most companies have been doing is from an aspiration of the mainstream. It's a lot of people who went into Asian theatre, had aspirations to go to the National or to etc. Whereas these guys don't have that. They just want to play out to the audiences in Hounslow, Wembley, and in Ilford. That's what they want to do. They don't care about the Nationals. They don't even know where it is, and which is brilliant. And I think that sector of Asian theatre is what needs to be brought up now, and that's what we're hopefully trying to achieve.
That sounds like a perfect ending, actually.